family home building permits have fallen to levels not seen in over 40 years. Building permit delays at the City of Toronto, I don't know what's going on there. And Tiff Macklin provides some insight on what he is struggling with as far as inflation is concerned. All this and your questions on episode 167 of the Wise Old Owl Show. Folks, thanks for tuning in. Before we get off, I want to thank EQ Bank and Damon Knights and Christina Minitel for the t-shirt / shirt. You know, they've been a big fan of the show, and they said, could you wear one of our shirts? I said, sure, come on, send it in. And sure enough, they delivered it this morning, and here we are. So hats off to EQ Bank, Damon and Christina. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you sending them through. So much love there. But let's talk a little bit about these single family permits. We have seen a drop off on single family home permits being built. Since the early 80s, we haven't seen these permit levels this low. And this is concerning because as more population comes into this country, how are these folks going to have shelter if we're not building enough of them in the next few years? These things take a while to be built. They're not going to be ready, and it's going to cause a problem. And one stat that was pointed out by Ben Robideau, an economist with Real Estate Edge, he indicated that there's one building permit or one home being built in Canada for every 25 people added to the population. A little bit concerning as to what is coming. Folks, nothing can get built in this city. We are dealing with contractors on a daily basis that are trying to build multi-units, and they can't get permits in time. We're dealing with situations where people are building within the zoning bylaw and not necessarily asking for exceptions or minor variances. These are things that pass zoning review and are ready to go as per the bylaw, and they can't get permits quick enough. I'm hearing contractors talk about the examiners issuing the permits not only working 3 days a week, they're not in on Mondays, they're not in on Fridays, they're trying to chase down supervisors via email because everybody's working from home and nothing is getting done. How can we go and build more homes when permit applications are at their lowest and they're still taking a long time? So this is really concerning. I'm just baffled by this because it doesn't make any sense. And what we need is government to start aligning and helping each other. Maybe the province could second some people that aren't at capacity, lend them to the City of Toronto to help permits be issued. Try to speed up the process, because if there's delays when permits are at their lowest point, what's going to happen when things start moving? Like, you're still stuck in the mud. And this is going to be a constant and regular occurrence. And it's going to frustrate developers, going to frustrate anybody that wants to invest capital into more units, and nothing's going to get built. I go back to some of the other points I made in the past. You know, you got 57 acres. The East District, the Allen East District lands between Downsview Station and Wilson, empty parcel of land zoned for high density, 3,000 plus units, not a shovel in the ground since that property changed hands into an organization called Create TO. 3 meetings with community representatives in 15 years, and there's not a shovel in the ground. Folks, nothing's going to get built. You know, the Greenbelt, people who protected the Greenbelt and are, you know, saying that there is, you know, infrastructure in the city where places could get built, nothing's getting built. It's starting to become a joke. And until we get governments to help each other out to speed up this process and get rid of red tape, nothing will get built. So we're going to get through another couple years. There's going to be more refugees landing here, more homeless people coming to the city. And where are all these homes going to be built? We're building the wrong ones. We're building only one-bedroom condos, and that's not going to be very useful for families. So what's the give here? It's just unbelievable what is going on. So we hope that people could wake up. We could get some movement at the city with these permits. Otherwise, you know what? Just expand the exhibits at the zoo for snails and sloths and let people go visually see, especially developers and builders, how fast our permit department works at. Like it's getting ridiculous. It's at a snail's pace. We need to get things moving. Come on, folks, let's do it. Let's build the city. Let's work together. Let's try to come up with a solution. You know, one idea I heard, you know, you go to the Ministry of Transportation and the dealers have an express lane. They have a special line where they could get their dealer plates permitted so they could sell cars. Imagine that. If anybody's adding net new units in the city of Toronto, they should have an express lane. There's an idea. How about that? Think about that, folks. New units for the city of Toronto should be fast-tracked, should be in an express lane. There's an idea. Run with it. Please, let's do something. Let's get these things built. Help people out, okay? So, you know, I don't mean to rant, but it's just frustrating. And in March, it'll be 2 years since our first rate hike. And as most of you who watch this regularly know that you've heard the term respect the lag, higher for longer. It's going to take a while. Prepare yourself for the bumpy road. The reality is we are starting to see things break. You're starting to see the economy slow down. And quite frankly, we're starting to see a recession. Okay, we're seeing signs of recession. And I want to point out something. You know, economists are fearful to announce that a recession is here. And I'm going to explain why. Most economists work for financial institutions. And financial institutions protect and invest people's money. Okay? They are looking after people's retirement funds. They're looking after people's portfolios. And if a recession is announced by the chief economists, people go into protection mode. And there's a fear that if they're wrong, you lose out on potential gains because you've gone into safe positions. So economists are always leery about announcing a recession because if they're wrong, it's basically a death knell for them. Okay, so they play around with these terms called soft landing. We should ease into it. We should be able to get through it. And they don't really announce a formal recession. The reality is we are. Okay, our GDP has been negative. It's been negative when you look at an overall number. On a per capita basis, it's been a shit show. And you could mask it by bringing in tons of people to make it seem like we're being more productive, but on a per capita basis, it's been ugly. And here's some things that people need to realize is over the last 2 years, almost 2 years, we've gone from the easiest monetary policy at zero interest rates to the tightest monetary policy in a very short period of time, and it's impacting growth. And what we're seeing is we're seeing unemployment go up, but labor shortages in certain sectors, which means the immigration that has come into this country is the wrong immigration. We didn't do the proper job of vetting certain sectors, certain immigrants that are needed for certain sectors requiring a specific type of labor. So there's been some confusion, a mismatch, no oversight in this regard. And it's causing a problem. And one of those problems is food insecurity. Very problematic today, okay? And sadly, this is impacting the lower income population. We've seen, since COVID, food go up 23%. We've seen energy go up 24%. Eggs up 30%. Housing up 30%. We've seen in the past 10 years, housing go up 77%, rents are spiking like crazy, and the reality is we will never go back to pre-COVID prices. So when we talk about inflation today, we're really talking about year-over-year increases, not necessarily talking that we think we're going to go backwards and see pre-COVID prices again. And this is the challenge that we need to deal with, because the lower income people are lining up at food banks. They're really struggling. And over the next 12 to 18 months, it's going to continue to be this way. So if you do have an opportunity to help out in any way, shape, or form, donate some non-perishable goods to your local fire hall in the city of Toronto. They will make sure that those goods are delivered to the Daily Bread Food Bank to help those in need, because more and more people are lining up and more folks are dealing with food insecurity, and it's going to continue to be a challenge. Young people today are dealing with permanent price shock. Like, they have now realized that things are expensive. They're losing hope in any type of future, and that's sad. It's very, very sad, and something that I'm quite concerned about. I have three older boys, 22, 21, and 19, and we talk about this, and their friends are worried. They're worried. Home ownership tends to be a topic that they think is just never going to happen, and it's sad. But we got to find ways to help them. We got to figure out how to solve this problem. We just need to build. We got to get rid of red tape. We got to make it easier. And you know what? We got to lose the special interest groups. Okay, if we really want to solve this problem, we got to cut the red tape and get to just building homes. Okay, helping people out, looking at ways to cut taxes, looking at ways to get rid of some of this red tape that's just clogging the process. Okay, and let's work together. Let's try to figure out a solution where everybody could win. The bond market is kind of flat this year. We started at about 3.33. We're still there a month later, still moving around at that level, some up days, some down days, but we've been flat over the course of a month. And I think we're probably going to possibly see things level off throughout the year. More and more folks are struggling to find ways to close on pre-construction homes. We're getting a call or two a day about folks that have no ability to close on their pre-construction purchases. These are folks that bought in early 2022. They're coming up to the point where they need to close, and most of their deposit that they put down on their home has been wiped out because values have come in lighter. It's posing a terrible predicament for folks, and what we're doing is we're trying to exhaust all avenues to try to assist, and some of those situations involve bringing in family members and co-signers to help. But the reality is a lot of folks don't want to be catching a falling knife. Okay, it's just not something people are comfortable doing, because they're going to have to put their name on the line, and a lot of folks are hesitant to do so, not knowing where this ends. Okay, anybody who does co-sign is on title for the full term of that mortgage, and they're fully responsible. Okay, it's not like the responsibility is carved up 2, 3, 4 ways. The bank will go after the strongest covenant if the other 2 or 3 can't pay anything. So this responsibility is a big one. And when people are contemplating helping, they're saying, you know what, not necessarily interested, and it's putting people in a very, very difficult situation. Had a case yesterday that I want to talk about, and this is really concerning, because I basically had to tell the guy to lose my number. Okay, so this is an individual who bought a condo and is supposed to be closing end of February. Unfortunately, he lost his job, and he has no ability to close this thing. And he only has 10-15% down and was asking for an insured mortgage, which is impossible. Just can't happen. He doesn't have a job. It's not going to happen. Can't help him. And he asked me if I produced false income documents. And this is a concern of mine, because if more and more people are in this situation, desperate people do desperate things. I lost it on the guy. Literally said, lose my phone number. Don't call me again. Okay, this is not something I'm involved in, nor do I want to hear it. But this is what's going to happen more and more as people get into these desperate situations. So if you are a mortgage professional or a realtor, okay, and people don't have the ability to get a mortgage, do not encourage them to go to any extent to find one, okay? Tap out, you're done. Get the lawyers on the horn and try to figure out a release or some type of resolution, because the reality is it is not in anybody's interest to do a mortgage that you can't pay for. Okay? It's just can't get blood from a stone. So as these situations come up, be firm, be honest with these folks, and tell them there's no option here. Your option is to try to negotiate out of the deal. Forego your down payment. There's no solution here. On that note, I'd like to move on to the Q&A. So tighten up the helmet, put on this chin strap, and we're going to get into some questions. What are some of the ways we can reshape how we buy and sell homes? I think we have to understand that the world's changed. We're moving into a scenario where in certain parts of the country, especially GTA, Greater Vancouver area, we're seeing high density. We're starting to see the proliferation of multi-units. And I think lenders and CMHC have to start thinking of better ways to allow people buying these multi-units to qualify with more rental income. Today, some of that rental income cannot be used in its entirety. It's only used as a portion, only a portion of it's used, like 50% in some cases. They only use an offset of so much. And I think it hurts the buyer when you know full well that they're going to be using the full amount. Now, there is vacancy rates and all that sort of stuff, but I think we need some latitude as we move into this new segment of 3-4 units to allow for that rental income to take on a better and more beneficial debt servicing component of those ratios. So what I'm trying to get at is lenders have to allow more of that rent to be used for qualification purposes, not 50%. I think it should be moved up to 75 or 85% and factor in a vacancy rate of maybe 4 or 5%. So you could help that buyer in a situation with the debt servicing stress test and the qualifying rate to have more of an opportunity to qualify for that mortgage, okay? Because what's happening is you're pushing these folks into the B side, the alternative, the private lending side, which is just quite damaging, and you can never seem to get out of that. So folks, lenders, let's come to some type of resolution and start thinking about how the changing dynamics of these urban centers require some change to qualifying criteria. So I will do my best to start advocating for these folks in this regard, and I hope we can create a groundswell of support to try to get some traction and try to help folks that are getting into these units. Because I do believe the makeup of the buyer down the road will be somebody that will live in a unit, rent out 2, a basement, 3 units, and help them support paying that mortgage. And today, if those units aren't legal, they're non-conforming, some lenders won't use the full income or none at all. And I think we need to start thinking through some better solutions to help folks qualify for mortgages. So that's a great question. I thank you for it. Investor question: if a mortgage payment is $5,000, $4,000 to interest, $1,000 to principal, how much is the tax deduction? if 4,000 or 80% of that payment is interest, the interest component is tax deductible. So it'll be approximately 48,000 in this example you're using. So you could only write off the interest component on an investment property, and you have to make sure that that debt, the full amount of that debt, was used for the investment. Okay, and I always caution people, when you're refinancing an investment property's debt and you're using proceeds of that refinance for personal reasons, that component for personal reasons is not tax deductible. Okay, CRA uses a term called commingling. If you commingle deductible debt and non-deductible debt, they will deny the full deduction and you have no interest to deduct on the total amount of debt. So be very, very careful and make sure that the amount of interest that you're deducting is on a balance used fully for investment purposes. Get your details and finalize your situation with your accountant, and make sure you do not have any non-deductible debt you're writing interest off on, okay? How do you feel about sellers holding out for higher bids as possible rate cuts loom? If you are a seller, I think it's important for you to price the home properly, okay? If you're holding out for higher bids because you think rates are coming down, I got news for you. It's going to be very difficult to predict where rates are coming from. Rates may be coming down, but there's still a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace. We still have a lot of folks that are insecure of their employment. And as I've said in the past, if you're insecure about your employment, you're less likely to make big purchases. You're not going to be buying any cars, you're not going to be buying any homes. You have less people in the pool looking to buy your home. So I think we're in an uncertain market right now, and it's best that if you're ready to sell, price it right and get rid of it. If you think you are going to hold out and you're saddled with some significant debt that you're continuing to carry, hoping that's going to get better, you know, that's a call. It's a math situation where you got to do the math. How much pain are you going to have to endure before that time comes? And you really don't have a timeline, because the Bank of Canada has made it clear that unless inflation comes down to 2 points, they're not reducing rates. So be cautious and understand your predicament and make the best decision for you and your family. How do you view government policies and their potential impact on the real estate market? What policy changes, if any, would you recommend for stability? Government policies always have an unintended consequence, okay? And it's really important that everybody understands the impact of policy. And I'll give you an example, okay? Back in 2016, 2018, you know, there was the stress test introduced, and then eventually all mortgages, not just insured mortgages, had to endure a stress test. And affordability became a challenge for a lot of first-time buyers. So in our business, when the stress test was more and more apparent, apparently impacting folks, we had an increase in the number of parents and guardians going on title to help their kids buy their first home, okay? And I give you this example because I'm going to illustrate an unintended consequence. So by doing so, you have parents that are co-signing and they're going on title, and some of them are going on as a 1% beneficial owner. And a few years back, I was having coffee with the housing minister. At the time it was Minister Hussein, and a buddy of mine set me up with him, and he goes, Vince, I'd like you to share with him your thoughts on the impact of how investors are proliferating in the marketplace. And he was concerned because his mandate letter from the Prime Minister was to go after investors, and the investor percentage went up from like 14-15% to 26 or 27% in a very short period of time. And I really drilled down on that point because I asked him, I said, do you really think they're all investors? Because your definition of an investor is anyone who has more than one home. And what happened during the stress test implementation is you had an impact of more and more parents going on title where they're now technically an owner of two properties because they're co-signing for their kids and acting as a beneficial owner on the child's house, and they also have their own home. So they're technically an investor. And government is trying to help solve this investor increase, like it spiked during the time of the stress test implementation. And there was a component of that increase that weren't necessarily investors. They were just parents trying to help their kids. Okay, and when I pointed that out to him, he goes, I never really thought about that. I said, well, I think your analysts need to drill a little bit deeper. And they have to drill into the registry systems and do searches of these investors to see if there's more folks on title than the traditional two, and check their ages to see if there's a 20, 30-year gap between buyers on title, because most likely it is a guardian or a parent helping out. And I bring this story up because that's an unintended consequence of a program that OSFI and B20 implemented with all lenders for debt servicing, the stress test, right? And it created another problem over here that the government now says, oh, we got a problem here, not knowing what caused it. So you got to be very careful. I think government needs to really think through their policies and make sure that they're not creating a ripple effect down the road of something they don't even realize. Folks, thank you, appreciate it. And I got some good news. I'm very close to launching my podcast. I've already recorded one episode and we're testing it out. Really excited about it. And I hope that it should be launched in the next 30, 45 days. Really excited about it. I want to thank all of your encouragement, all of your comments and feedback and asking me to do this. I know it took me a while, but I wanted to do it right, and I'm really, really excited about it. And I hope it provides more insight on some topics that you guys have all asked me to cover. So on that note, have a great day, and we'll see you next week.